Okay, everyone, welcome once again to our leadership development webinar. And again, thank you very much for being here this evening. My name is Carissa, and I handle communication and events for Underwood Talent Development Services. Tonight, I'll be assisting our facilitator with moderating. So just a few housekeeping matters before we begin. You may have noticed that we have muted your mic, but of course that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So please use the chat box, which you will find located at the bottom of your screen, to post any questions, comments, or concerns, and we'll be able to address you from there. You can also feel free to use the reactions feature, and you can find that also at the menu bar at the bottom of your screen. So let's get the ball rolling by using the chat box. Open your chat box, please, and comment and let us know where you're joining from. And I will start. So we have someone from New York. Welcome, Jasmine. Welcome, Deborah, also from Antigua with me. Anthony Lindsay from Antigua. Oh, you guys are fast. Belize. More Antiguans. Hello, everybody. And once again, thank you for being here. I'm glad to see that we're all familiar with the chat box and not having any issues with accessing it. So now that we've broken the ice a little bit and we're getting familiar with each other and where we're from, I'd like to introduce our facilitator. Joan H. Underwood is a purpose-driven talent development specialist who is blessed to wake up each day to fulfill her life's mission of helping leaders become the best possible and most professional versions of themselves. Armed with her core values of professionalism, execution, and accountability, an executive master's degree in business administration from the Cave Hill School of Business, and designations of senior professional in human resources, an accredited director, master trainer, certified change practitioner, and an Erickson professional coach in her proverbial toolkit, Joan helps small to medium-sized enterprises, governments, and Caribbean institutions develop high-performance individuals, teams, and strategies. She's the author of an upcoming book designed to help new and aspiring managers to master the transition from individual contributor to leader. An avid reader, Joan particularly enjoys a good book, date nights with her husband Rudy, listening to the sweet melodies of pan music, and fellowship with her church community, and being an active member of the Human Resource Management Association of Barbados. Ambassador Underwood, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much, Carissa, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. We see that we still have some people joining in, but we do believe in punctuality, so we're going to get the ball rolling. So as Carissa has indicated, this is our first webinar. You can see from the title slide, and I'd just like you to give me a confirmation in the chat box that you're able to see the slide with the title of this evening's webinar, Level Up, Transition from Line Staff to Leader. So Carissa, let me know if they have in fact confirmed that they can see the slide so that we can jump right in. We have so much to cover this evening.
Yes, our participants are able to see.
Excellent. So here we go. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ciara's song, Level Up. And here we have just an excerpt from that song. I just keep elevating, no losses, just upgrading. My lessons made blessings, I turned that into money. Thank God I never settled. This view is so much better. I'm chilling, I'm winning, like on another level. And that's exactly what we want to help you to do, to take your performance to another level. So in terms of the format for this evening, we have 3 primary segments that we will cover. In the first one, we'll talk about the pitfalls associated with leveling up. And of course, level up, we use that expression to refer to the transition from individual contributor to leader. Then we'll look at the top 3 challenges that new managers need to master. And then we'll round out with purposeful preparation, what, when, and how of it. And we will have at the end some time for Q&A. However, that doesn't mean that we won't be hearing from you even before that. So it'll be an interactive session. So we will encourage you to utilize your chat box throughout this evening's webinar. So, question for you. How would you feel if your boss told you that you were being promoted to manager? How would that make you feel? What emotion might that elicit? And I'm encouraging you to use the chat bar. Just type in the emotions that would probably come up for you. And I have some emojis here that may give you some ideas.
In the chat.
Yeah, what are the responses saying?
Most people so far are excited. Gordon, Deborah, Mario, excited and happy, overwhelmed, scared.
Yeah. Yes. And some people might be panicked, because if you don't feel that you're ready, it could really be a scary announcement. All right, so thanks for sharing that, and we'll move on. So let's start out with some statistics. 53% of newly appointed managers reported that they didn't have an accurate understanding of what it meant to be a manager. An even higher percentage, 60%, of new managers either fail or underperform in their first 2 years in the role, 60%. 51%, again above the halfway mark, 51% of managers said that they felt unprepared for their first managerial role. And on social media, some of you have even shared that with me since you registered for this webinar. More than half of new managers said that they learned through trial and error on the job, as opposed to stepping into the job being ready for it. Only 39% of managers reported that they received training from their employers. And this is really important, because what it says is that essentially you have to take responsibility for ensuring that you get the training that you need, so that you're not relying on trial and error. Here's another statistics. Managers ranked training for the transition to the managerial role as number 2 out of the 10 most important training interventions. Number 2 out of 10. So you see that this type of training that we're going through tonight is really important to the success of managers. So for some of you, you might be thinking that, these statistics are more scary than they are cool. And you'd be absolutely right. And that's why interventions such as the one that we're having this evening can help to turn this picture around. So let's talk about the pitfalls associated with the transition, with leveling up. So the reality is that the skills and competencies which enable you to excel as an individual contributor are really not the ones that you need in order to succeed as a manager. So that's a major pitfall. Here's another. Managing people is the single most challenging task that you will ever undertake. And I tell you this because I have battle scars to prove it. However, there's some silver lining. It can also be the most rewarding if you get it right. Here's another reality. We all have blind spots, things that we were not aware of about ourselves, and we can't manage what we don't know. So we may be proceeding down the road thinking we're doing a bang-up job, and everybody else in the building thinks you are about to fall flat on your face. So self-awareness is important when it comes to being effective in your managerial role. Being a manager can be very stressful. Why? Because it's your job as manager to ensure that everyone else does their job. As an individual contributor, you're responsible for ensuring that you do a good job. When you transition to manager, you're then responsible for ensuring that everyone on the team is performing at an optimal level. And as a manager, you have to become your own best advocate. As I mentioned before, when we looked at the statistics, 39% of managers said that the employers didn't provide training to help them with the transition. So if you want to succeed as you transition, you are going to have to advocate to ensure that you get the training and support that you need. So what is it that a manager actually does? And the question might sound trite, but an Office Vibes survey revealed that 40% of managers did not receive a clear list of responsibilities when they were appointed. So they got the job and they weren't quite sure what it was they were supposed to be doing. So let's take care of that right here by looking at some high-level managerial responsibility. And so 4 primary ones. As a manager, you're required to develop, support, coach, motivate, and reward your employees. You're also expected to set goals and performance standards for the members of your team. You should be implementing and maintaining work systems, policies, and procedures. And finally, you're required to network and act as a liaison between the employees and upper management. So these are your primary high-level responsibilities as a manager. So based on my experience over the last few decades, as an HR practitioner, my time as an executive coach, I have found that the top 3 challenges that managers experience can be placed in these categories. First of all, self-management. Secondly, managing others. And the final one would be managing systems and processes. So managing self, managing others, and managing systems and processes. So at this point in time, I'm going to take a deeper dive into the first challenge, the challenge of managing self. So I'm inviting you to weigh in the chat box. We have a little quiz up on the screen right now, true or false, and you can just type T or F to indicate your response. And here's the statement. Because I was a good technician, I will automatically be a good team leader. True or false? What do you think?
Our participants are very responsive. We have Jason with false, Gordon with false, Janelle with false, Deborah false. Overwhelming majority of persons indicating that the statement is false. No truths. Carrie says it's a big F.
They're all absolutely right. There's nothing automatic about a good technician being a good team leader. You have to work at it. And the reason that this is the case is because the competencies are so different. What you do as an individual contributor is quite different from what you're required to do as a manager. So excellent. So interestingly, one of the persons who registered for this webinar, when we actually posted that quiz as a teaser, and a certain gentleman who responded to me, shared this article. And it was based on a recent interview that Clive Lloyd, the really outstanding captain of the West Indies team, one of the winningest captains, and he said that in principle, he agrees with former players stepping in to provide mentorship for the new generation. But he offered a word of caution. And here it is. We have to find out how strong they are in certain departments. You can't just say this guy is going to be this when he isn't suited for that role. You have to find out what strengths he or she has. And that's exactly why the answer to the quiz was false. There's nothing automatic about your being successful as a leader, as a manager, just because you were a good batsman, a good bowler, a good fielder. Or in the case of your work environments, you can be a wonderful technician, a wonderful teller in the bank, a wonderful waitress, and get promoted to a supervisory or managerial role and just feel overwhelmed because all of a sudden you're no longer doing the stuff that you're good at. You have all this new stuff that you need to be doing. All right, so managing self, one component in terms of your personal needs in order to succeed as a manager would be to develop emotional intelligence. And now you may be more familiar with IQ than EQ. IQ, of course, is the cognitive intelligence. And you know, that's pretty much fixed. Emotional intelligence, on the other hand, you can develop that. And why is it important? Because research has shown that as much as 85% to 90% of your success at work depends on emotional intelligence, not cognitive intelligence. So think about that. So if you haven't developed emotional intelligence, can you see how that would have an adverse impact on the likelihood of your success? So under managing self, one of the things that you need to do is to grow your emotional intelligence. Second thing that is important for managing self is that it's important to leave some of the old habits behind as you level up and to develop new habits based on your new role and what's required to succeed there. All right, so leaving old habits behind, starting to develop new habits, essential to personal self-mastery. Third element, you got to get ready for when the buck stops. Because once you become a manager, there will be occasions when the buck stops right there with you. And in order for you to be ready for when that happens, it's important for you to know the difference between responsibility, accountability, and blame. And by the way, if you get the sense that I'm just teasing you with this content, that's exactly what we're doing. We're giving you an overview. We're not taking a deep dive in this first webinar. We're just introducing you to the big picture. And there will actually be a series of other webinars where we do take a deeper dive into each of the challenges and how you can cope with and master those challenges. So, okay, remember we are on the first challenge, which is on managing self. We said that you need to grow your emotional intelligence. We said that you need to trade in some of your old habits for new habits, and you need to get ready for when the buck stops. Here's one more. Self-care cannot be delegated. Self-management requires taking care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So in order for you to be able to give to all these people on your team, to take care of all the responsibilities you have in relation to managing a team, managing the processes, etc., you got to first take care of yourself. All right. So to recap, main challenges under managing self: growing your emotional intelligence, developing winning habits, getting ready for when the buck stops with you, and replenishing your cup. So are there other challenges under managing self that you can think about? And if so, I invite you to share them with us in the chat box. First, any questions in the chat box for me to address before I move on to the next challenge?
Nothing so far.
Okay.
If anyone has any questions, now's the time. Now's a good time, I should say. No? All right, let's move on.
All right, thank you. All right, so managing self, next challenge, managing others. As a manager, wouldn't you just love to say that I have these people in the palm of my hand? Okay, well, there's some things we can help you with to get close to that. Don't know if it's possible to get them completely in your hand, but you certainly can up your game when it comes to managing others. So here's the quiz: true or false? All managers are natural leaders. True or false? What say you?
False. Nope, not at all. No truths. Everyone says it's false.
Okay, and of course it is, right? And if you think about your personal experience, your work life, hopefully you've had some fantastic managers, and in all probability, you probably had some that weren't quite where you would like them to be. So this is false. All managers are not natural leaders. But here's some things that you can do in order to ensure that you do show up as an effective leader. So this is a model that I've developed, and this is a sneak preview. The model is in the book, and we're just previewing it here. And what I have found, again, over my years of experience as a manager myself and working with my coaching clients, including those at the highest levels in the executive suites, these 6 elements are absolutely essential to have successful relationships. And the thing is, while the model was developed for work relationships, it applies equally to relationships in your personal life. So the 6 building blocks are trust, effective communication, positive mindset, empathy, respect, and the platinum rule. Now, what I've found is that the platinum rule isn't that well known. And lots of people know the golden rule, but not as many know the platinum rule. So if you want to find out in detail what the platinum rule means and why it's so important to be at the top of the relationship building block, then you'll have to come back to the webinar that we're going to do on managing others. All right, of course, if your patience isn't enough for you to wait until that webinar, you can always Google it. But I'm looking forward to telling you more about the platinum rule. So building strong relationships, that's one of the things that you need to do in order to be successful managing others. Here's another model. This one is not one of mine. This is a situational leadership model, and it has been around, I think, since in the 70s. But there's a reason that it has survived all this time. It is extremely effective. Here's the thing. If all you have in your toolkit is a hammer, chances are you're going to go through life acting as if everything is a nail, because the hammer is all you have to use in the world, right? That's ineffective, because if you find a screw, you shouldn't take a hammer to it. Okay, if you find a piece of wood that needs cutting, a hammer is not going to do it. And so it is with situational leadership. We can't lead everyone the same way. We can't interact with all our direct reports in the same way all the time. Leadership is situational. And so one of the things that we will be doing in that webinar on managing others is helping you to understand how to decide what is the appropriate leadership style given certain contextual factors based on the individual and the nature of the task at hand. So matching leadership to the situation. Something else that is absolutely essential is effective delegation. Now, if you're a manager, you already know this, that you hardly ever have enough time to get everything done. You're not alone. Most managers, have the same complaint. Yet, when we talk to these managers, we find out that they're reluctant to delegate. So some of you in this webinar, I know, are already managers. Why don't you share with us in the chat? How do you feel about delegation? Are you reluctant to delegate? And if so, why? So Carissa, once you see any input in the chat box, please let me know what our participants are saying.
We have no responses so far. Okay, I have one from Alvi, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, who says, not an issue, it's just to whom. I have someone else responding, sometimes I am because I'm a doer.
Yes.
I have no problems with delegating from another respondent. Sometimes it may be difficult getting persons to do things the way you would like for it to be done.
Oh, Carissa, stop right there. There are two I want to comment on. There's one person who said, I'm a doer. Well, if you want to succeed as a manager, you got to let go of some of that doing. Because remember, we said the manager's responsibility, the leadership is all about getting things done with and through others. You have a team. It's important that you deploy your team appropriately to help get things done. Because if you take all the duties you were doing before you became a manager, if you take those along with you when you become a manager and simply add the managerial duties to that, you're going to be pouring from an empty cup. All right, so it's important to be able to delegate appropriately. And we had another comment that said that it depends. And that is absolutely right, because there's a right and a wrong way to delegate. And at this point, I'd like to tell you that you may recall that we've indicated that there's going to be a special giveaway, a special prize, a special thank you for attending the webinar with us this evening. And I can tell you now that the giveaway for this evening's webinar is the 10 Commandments for Great Delegation. So that's a job aid that UTDS has developed, the 10 Commandments for Great Delegation. And later on, Carissa will tell you what you need to do in order to get your copy of those 10 Commandments. All right, so some of you are great at delegation already. Congrats. Others, there's some help on the way. Okay, in order to manage others, it's important to know how to influence them. And influence includes your boss, because you can indeed acquire the skills to manage up. And what you see here on the slide are 6 principles of persuasion and influence. This is based on work by Robert Cialdini. It's a best-selling publication. And you have the 6 principles are reciprocation, social proof, commitment and consistency, liking, authority, and scarcity. And while the deep dive won't take place this evening, I just want to pick out one of these principles and to share a story to illustrate the point. And that's the one that I'm selecting is reciprocation. So what exactly is reciprocity? And I'll tell you a story from recent times, from the headlines, to illustrate the point. So back when the coronavirus epidemic started in Wuhan, China, the government of Trinidad and Tobago sent a shipment of gloves and PPEs and some other supplies to China to help support them. And you might think Trinidad and Tobago, size of them versus the size of the People's Republic of China. I mean, what difference would what Trinidad donated, what difference would that make in China, a country of that magnitude? But the thing is, Trinidad saw that a friendly nation was in a difficult situation, and they did what they could to help. Shortly thereafter, as you're aware, what was an epidemic in Wuhan and in China was declared a global pandemic. So I don't know if you've heard or you've read the news coverage of this, but what happened is that China sent Trinidad and Tobago a huge shipment. They got ventilators, they got thermometers to take temperature, they got testing kits at a time when testing kits were scarce globally. So because Trinidad did something nice for China, China was predisposed when the opportunity presented itself to reciprocate by doing something nice for Trinidad and Tobago. That's the principle of reciprocity. Now, I want to contrast reciprocity with quid pro quo. Now, if you were paying any attention to what was happening in the USA late last year and leading up to Christmas, etc., when President Trump had his impeachment hearings, you heard a lot about quid pro quo. Now, there's a big difference between reciprocity and quid pro quo. When Trinidad and Tobago sent the shipment to China, they didn't condition it on anything. It was a gesture of goodwill. Contrast that now with the reports of the conversations that would have taken place between Donald Trump himself and the leaders from Ukraine, where it was explicitly stated, if you do that, you will get this. That's quid pro quo. That is not one of the principles of influence. Contrast that with reciprocity and be clear that you understand the difference. Okay, so again, to summarize, here are some of the things that you need to be able to master in order to succeed in overcoming the challenges associated with managing others. You need to be able to build strong relationships, match your leadership style to the situation, master the art and the science of delegation, and know how to influence others, including your boss. So, Carissa, has anything come up in the chat box that I should address before I move to the third challenge?
No new questions this time.
Okay. So we go to challenge number 3. Remember, challenge number 1 was managing self. Challenge number 2 was managing others. Challenge number 3, managing systems and processes. So as usual, we start each challenge with a quiz. True or false? Managers have less work to do than staff. What do you think?
3 persons responding false. Overwhelming majority of persons responding false. Again, no one saying true.
Okay, and with good reason. No.
Oh, we have one person who says that it depends.
Ah, okay. So that would be interesting to hear more on that. So I encourage that person to put a little bit more into the chat box. Now, the thing is, line staff often perceive that, managers don't have anything to do. All they do is, attend meetings and just chat all day long and sit behind a big desk. The day you sit behind that big desk is the day, if you haven't realized it already, you realize just how much work is entailed there. So did we get an explanation from the person that said it depends, Carissa?
No further comments.
All right, so you can always still continue to type into the chat box and we'll come back to it later on. So in terms of managing systems and processes, there are three that I'd like to highlight, because as a manager, as a leader, you have to get things done with and through others. And so your team, ensuring that they're high performing is one of the ways in which you can do that. So most of us, when we become managers, we don't get to pick our teams. We inherit a team. Even though it's an inherited team, and if you had your druthers, you might have picked different people, you have to work with what you have in the first instance. All right? So there are some things that you can do, whatever team you inherit, to create and maintain high performance within that team. And that's something that we'll take a deeper dive in when we look at managing systems and processes in a subsequent webinar. Next, so that's at the level of the entire team, ensuring that the team is high performance. Now, at the level of the individuals within your team, and hopefully your organization has reached the level of maturity in HR where they have a performance management system. And within that performance management system, you as the manager have responsibility for setting goals for the entire team, but also for the individuals within the team, and to coach them in order to achieve the goals that have been set for them. Because when each individual on your team accomplishes his or her goals, what that means is that your entire department accomplishes its goals, and then you can contribute to the realization of the organizational level goals. So one of the things that we're covering in Level Up is the GROW model of performance coaching. And the final element in terms of managing systems and processes is meetings. And I would put my neck on a block that everyone in this webinar this evening has been in a meeting where you've asked yourself one of these questions. Why am I here? What is this meeting about? Why couldn't they just have sent an email or a memo? So let me see in the chat box if you've experienced that. Have you been in one of those meetings where you felt more like a hostage than a participant or a contributor to what was being discussed? Where there appeared to be no clear agenda, where the meeting just went on and on and on beyond any useful adding any value. Okay, so Carissa, I see that Johnny Williams has raised a hand. So Johnny, we encourage you to use the chat box and tell us what it is you'd like to share with us.
He says it was done in error, but we do have a lot of responses to your question. Someone says just as recently as today, a lot of people are indicating yes, absolutely, at times and often. Someone else says that it's their greatest challenge.
Indeed. And so we have some strategies that can help you to end the hostage crisis. All right. And so you see here that there's a checklist, but what we have for you in Level Up goes beyond that. But it's important to have a clear purpose, to know what it is that you want to achieve, roles and the process for your meeting, having an agenda, making sure the right people in the room, and follow through. Because it doesn't end when the meeting is over. It ends when the work is done. All right? So to recap, the three main elements in mastering the challenge of managing processes and systems are creating and maintaining a high performance team, being able to coach for performance, and changing your meetings from a hostage crisis situation to a great meeting, and we take it from soup to nuts. All right, so we've outlined the three main challenges. And Carissa, anything I need to address before I move on?
There's a comment here from Gordon who says, I think people may believe that some managers have nothing to do because they seem very busy controlling rather than leading, especially when that control spills over into things they have no business trying to control, like your personal life or business.
Oh gosh, yes. And Gordon, that starts from persons who haven't mastered the self-management challenge, because that person may have those leaders, those managers may have a blind spot, so they're not even aware of how people perceive them, that they're micromanaging, that they're meddling in things that are not their business. So managing self, growing your emotional intelligence, developing self-awareness and self-regulation, those are really important if you are to succeed in your managerial role. Thanks for that, Gordon. Have anything else for me, Carissa?
No, we can proceed.
Okay. So now we transition to purposeful preparation. So what is that anyway? So I have a series of quotations to help develop an understanding of purposeful preparation. And we start with the 5 P's motto. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. I love that. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. And as we go through, please put in the chat box which of these resonate with you. Okay, this one has a story behind it. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Now, my brother Jerome is a soccer coach, and I think it was an under 12 team. I'm not sure if it's 12 or 15, but anyway, there were kids. And there's one day that, you know, Jerome is working the sidelines, and he says to one of his young players, you know, so the little boy's name is Joe. Joe, get ready, I'm gonna put you in. And Joe, without missing a beat, says to Jerome, Coach, I am ready. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Such wisdom from one so young. And that's what purposeful preparation is about. You don't wait until you're called into the game to get ready. You stay ready so that when the call comes, you're good to go. Now, for those of you who are into basketball, you're probably familiar with the name Coach K. And this quotation is from Coach K. What you do now sets up what you do later, and there's always a later. So every moment of the day, show up in a way that says that I'm preparing myself to level up. Here's another statement. Leadership training needs to start even before the role begins. Remember those statistics at the beginning of the webinar where more than half of the managers, they just weren't ready. Where, 60% of them either failed or underperformed in the first 2 years in the new role. They weren't ready. And finally, from John Maxwell, and some of you may be familiar with John Maxwell's work. And Maxwell says, leadership is not about titles, positions, or flowcharts. It's about one life influencing another. And that's why this webinar is relevant for you, even if you're not a manager, even if you're saying, look, I don't really want to be a manager. You can be a leader without having the title of manager, because you can exert influence within your organization, within your family, within your social grouping. That's purposeful preparation. So I have a story to tell, not my original story. I actually got this from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And there's a story in that book about, an older gentleman walking through the forest and coming across a younger gentleman. And you can see in the picture here, the older gentleman is looking at the younger gentleman, and he seems to be working at something. And so after sitting on the log and observing him for a period of time, the older gentleman says, what is it exactly that you're doing? And, with some irritation, the younger guy says, well, can't you see I'm cutting down the tree? And the older gentleman observes, you don't seem to be making much progress. And the guy responds, yeah, that's because the saw is dull. So the older man looks at him completely puzzled and confused. So why don't you sharpen the saw? And the young gentleman replies, I don't have time to sharpen the saw. I'm too busy cutting down the tree. Now, as it's related in this story, the folly of it is obvious. But think about it. So many of us go through life being so busy that we don't take the time to sharpen our saw. And that has adverse implications from about how effective you are and how efficient you are. So I encourage you now to engage in some introspection. How good are you at sharpening your saw? And you'll see that there is a bidirectional arrow here. On the left, it says my saw is very sharp, and you have the stars, and over on the right, my saw is very dull. So let's imagine that on the far left, where you have the stars and the caption, my saw is very sharp, let's call that a 10. And over to the far right, my saw is very dull, that's a 1. I invite you now to type into the chat box, okay? And Carissa, don't call out names this time, just call out the numbers for me, okay? So this is, just a little bit of introspection and a self-check. Where would you place yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being my saw is as sharp as it can get, and 1, my saw is very dull? Where are you?
We have some responses coming in. We have 8, 7, 7, 7, 8.5, 7, 6. We have a 9,
Wow.
8. More 6s and 7s.
Okay, so it seems as if we have, in this webinar, folks who are doing, okay to pretty good. From 6 to 9 was the range that I heard there. So, but guess what, people? Even if you're at a 9, you still need to be sharpening your saw every day. So think about Usain Bolt, before he retired. So, I mean, his saw was sharp, but he was still out there on that track. He was still in that gym. He was still honing his craft, practicing, preparing to level up every time that he went. And so it is with you. No matter where you are in your career, no matter how high performing you are currently, there's still scope for you to level up. So a brief recap of where we've been, Carissa, and where we've taken our participants throughout this webinar. We looked at the pitfalls associated with leveling up, and we emphasized that the competencies required from an individual contributor are not the same as managerial competencies. We looked at the top 3 challenges that new managers need to master, and we define those as managing self, managing others, and managing systems and processes. We then looked at purposeful preparation, the what of it, the when of it, the how of it, and we did that through a discussion on sharpening your saw and realizing that it's something that you need to be doing now and on an ongoing basis. So as you see see before you the summary of what we've covered. Are there any questions, comments, general feedback you'd like to share before we move on?
There is a comment in the chat box asking if there are any tips on how we can sharpen our saw and continue to sharpen our saw.
Absolutely. Loads of tips, loads of strategies. And one of the ways that you can continue to sharpen your saw, and you've engaged in that process by spending the last 50 minutes or so participating in this webinar. And we actually will be bringing to you some additional webinars, again, completely free of cost to you. This is our way of giving back. And it's also my way of doing some research, as Clarissa mentioned, when we started out the webinar. I'm currently finishing up work on my book, which should be published before the end of the year. And the content that I'm sharing with you here is from the book, so I'm doing some field testing with you and would welcome your feedback. You're raising additional issues that perhaps you would like to see addressed, so that I can see if it would be possible to incorporate them into the book. All right, so thanks for that, and we look forward to seeing you in future webinars so that we can indeed help you to further sharpen your saw.
So we have some additional comments. Someone is saying thank you for giving back, and a question asking if the book will be offered to us, and thank you for giving back.
Oh, I hope to sell thousands of books. So once we have the book launch, well, leading up to the book launch, we'll be coming back and telling you a lot more about it. So thanks for asking. And we look forward to you not just getting the book for yourself, but also if there are people in your life that you think could use some help in leveling up, consider making it a Christmas gift. So that's kind of a hint about when it will be out. And we'll also be reaching out to companies and employers, because remember the statistics about how unprepared the majority of managers are for their first role. Because a lot of times when you promote someone to be a supervisor or a manager, they can feel really lost. And so we're going to be promoting the book as something that you can give to someone along with the announcement that they're being promoted. All right, so this webinar series continues, and as you can see, we have planned a total of 5 webinars in the series. And so this was webinar 1, where we gave you an overview of the entire book. In webinar 2, we'll be taking a deep dive into section 1 of the book, which is all about managing self. Webinar number 3 will focus on managing others. Webinar 4 on managing systems and processes. And webinar number 5 is a passion project for me because it's an all-male focus group. So I know we have some men in here. I know for sure Gordon is in here. So Gordon, I'm going to need you to round up your crew and come to webinar number 5, okay? Because oftentimes we don't hear enough from the men within the organization in terms of what is it that they need to be able to take their performance to the next level. And so, ladies, I'm going to ask you to give me some private time with the men during webinar 5, because all I want to hear from them is what are your needs in terms of helping you to sharpen your saw when you level up. So Carissa, you want to tell participants how they can go about getting access to the remaining webinars?
Absolutely. So we have been receiving some feedback, some qualitative feedback about the content of today's webinar in the chat box. So thank you for your feedback and thank you for your appreciation. As our our thank you for being with us, we are providing you with a job aid, and I am placing the link that you can use to access it in the chat box. It also includes just some questions so that we can pick your brain. If you wouldn't mind, please completing that for us. And at the end of the survey, you will find a link to access the job aid, which will be available to you for over the next 24 hours. So if you want to make sure that you get the job aid, trust me, it's worth it. You'll need to access that and complete the survey over the next 24 hours. If you have any questions or difficulties, just send me a private message and I'll be happy to help you.
All right, so let me give you a little bit more insight. Okay, sorry about that. Someone got unmuted by accident. All right, so I just want to give you a little insight about the job aid. So in order for you to get that job aid, we're asking you to complete the survey, and Carissa has indicated she'll provide the link to the survey. And at the end of the survey, there's actually the link that you can click on to get your own copy of the 10 Commandments for Great Delegation. Now, as Carissa mentioned, I want to ensure that it's clear to you, you have 24 hours to claim that job aid. So the link will be deactivated at 8 p.m. tomorrow. Now, why is this important? Remember when we looked at the principles of influence and persuasion, scarcity was one of those. So those who registered for this webinar, you are the only folks who will get this job aid before the book is published. And again, that's my way of saying thank you. And thank you not just for attending the webinar, but for completing the survey as well, because as I indicated, the information that you provide during the survey is going to help me to fine-tune the book even further to make sure that it really meets your needs. So you're the select few. So here's the deal now. After every webinar, we're going to give away a job aid. Okay, so there are 5 webinars, there'll be 5 job aids. The thing is, the one after webinar 5, only the guys can get it, all right, because they're the only ones who'll be attending that webinar. But you have to register for the webinar to get the job aid. So if you have friends or colleagues that you think could benefit from this, please tell them to make sure that they register, and they need to do so early, because this meeting room is capped at 100 registrants. And we actually were oversubscribed for this particular webinar. So don't risk being disappointed for any of the upcoming webinars. Register as soon as possible to ensure that you get into the webinar and that you get the job aid that would be a special giveaway after that webinar. All right, Carissa, anything else from you about that aspect, the looking forward steps?
I would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to follow our social media pages. I will place the link for the Underwood Talent Development Services Facebook page in the chat box as well. And you can subscribe to the page, follow us, and you'll receive updates of the upcoming webinars and other interesting content on our pages. And if you do want to register for further webinars, there is a prompt in the survey. You can indicate to us what you're interested in, and we will reach out to you to assist you with facilitating your registration.
All right. Thanks for that, Carissa. Oh, and I also want to point out that if you would like additional information, not more stuff from the book, but my blog, for example, there are a number of blog articles that you can refer to, which does cover some of this material. You can visit my website, and it's utds That stands for Underwood Talent Development Services. So UTDS Inc. And Carissa, if you could just put that in the chat box for them as well. UTDSinc.com. We invite you to visit our website, check out the blog series, and you'll find some articles that can also help you to level up. And our time is just about up. So we'll wrap now by going back to Ciara. And as Ciara levels up, them old mistakes are gone. I won't do them no more. That's old news. There's new news. I did that before. I turned them into something. My comeback is on 100. Less talking, more action. You just gonna see coming. So like Ciara, level up.